You've won while I've been left with nothing. You walk away with the property, the cash, and an upgraded partner. Tonight, the hotel room and all the arrangements I made are yours. Please don't return the gift. It would only serve as a painful reminder of your betrayal. I'm heading home and have no interest in seeing you, him, or your friends again. Let me know when your team will come to collect your things. Anything that's left behind will be packed up, a reminder of the mess our marriage became. As my father from the Air Force used to say, yay for me and screw you, I'm done with you. Enjoy your new life, you've earned it with those acting skills of yours. 10 years later, on a Wednesday morning, I woke to a loud banging. Rubbing sleep from my eyes, I glanced at the clock, 8:15 a.m. The knocking continued, now coming from my front door. Who could be knocking at this hour? I slipped into my robe and slippers and made my way downstairs, where the knocking grew even louder. Peering through the peephole, I saw a disheveled woman. I opened the door, ready to scold her, and immediately recognized her. She was older, thinner, her once bright hair now streaked with gray. She smelled bad, and her dress was tattered. She looked like Ella, the homeless woman who used to hang around the streets and underpasses. In disbelief, I asked the woman who used to be my wife, "Is that really you?" "Yes, Jake, it's me," she begged. "Can I come inside?" I replied, "No," and slammed the door in her face. But then, another knock came, accompanied by her sobs. "Please, Jake, I'm begging you, open the door." I flung the door open to stop the pounding but stayed in the doorway to prevent her from entering. The neighbors already thought I was strange. I didn't want to draw more attention with a scene on the doorstep. "What do you want?" "I made it clear 10 years ago that I never wanted to see you again." "What part of that didn't you understand? And why are you here?" "I thought you and Dr. Wonderful were living in Milwaukee." Ella wiped her tears and gave me a look of longing I'd never seen before. "Can I come in? I'm hungry, tired, and need to use the restroom." "Please, I'll explain later." With my experience as a teacher, I could tell she was about to make a mess. I didn't want her using my porch as a bathroom, so I reluctantly opened the door wider and silently invited her in. "You remember where the bathroom is, don't you?" I reminded her, signaling that we used to share this home. "Hurry up, thanks," Ella said, entering. She dropped her suitcase and hurried to the downstairs bathroom. I closed the door, went upstairs for a quick bathroom break, and then returned downstairs. Ella was still in the bathroom, so I headed to the kitchen, started up my Keurig, and brewed a cup of coffee. By the time Ella came back, she asked, "Can I have a cup?" I hesitated, caught between anger and restraint. I wasn't about to slap a woman, but I didn't want any trouble either. "Yeah, I'm not heartless," I said, "though I'm not your servant either." "So, fine, I'll make you some. I don't have anything fancy, just milk and sugar." "Black's fine," Ella replied gratefully. I handed her the cup, watching her hands tremble. "Why are you here?" I asked. "I've got nowhere else to go," she admitted finally. "I spent my last dime on the cab fare." "What happened to your beloved Dr. Scott?" I asked with a sarcastic tone. "Dr. Scott?" she repeated, stammering. "It all fell apart. After the divorce, we got married, but things went bad when Scott got hit with a huge medical malpractice lawsuit. We lost our jobs, our medical licenses, and everything else. Scott became abusive, blaming me for our downfall. One day, I caught him cheating, so he got a taste of his own medicine," I remarked wryly, recalling our own past drama. "But karma's a kicker." "Not funny," Ella whimpered. "Just like it wasn't funny when you publicly tore me apart on our anniversary," I reminded her. "Do you realize it's the 10th anniversary of that night?" "No, I didn't know," Ella murmured. "Did you report him to the cops?" I asked, showing a bit of compassion. "No, I was too scared. But I did get a divorce. Unfortunately, I ended up with almost nothing after that," Ella explained. "I haven't eaten in 2 days." "What's your play here?" I asked. "Sympathy." You might find it between crap and chlamydia in the dictionary, Ella shot back bitterly. I despise you. I loathe you as much as I once adored you. Now that your world is falling apart, you come crawling back to me. Where are your parents and friends now? I asked. They've all abandoned me, Ella sobbed. Not surprising, I scoffed bitterly. Did you and the idiot have kids? No, we never did. Turns out Scott is infertile. He blamed me for that too, she spat. Well, at least the gene pool's safe from you too, I remarked wryly. Guess something good came out of that mess, she wrinkled her nose at me. What happened to you, Jake? You used to be so caring and kind. My anger turned into fury as I squeezed my eyes shut. You want to know what happened? Look in the mirror. You happened. Thanks to you, I'm incapable of love and trust. The nice guy finished last, but I thought you'd move on, find someone else, Ella wheezed, wide-eyed. Get real, I replied, after everything you've done, you never once hinted that I was just a fallback. I thought we had something real, but it turns out it was all a lie. 13 years, 10 of those as husband and wife. Do you think I can trust anyone after that? I took a deep breath. And how many women do you think would want someone like me, all damaged and scarred? Not that I had a queue of interested parties, I muttered to myself. Still, not a single woman came around. So, are you surprised I've become a recluse after a decade of nursing my wounds? I guess not, Ella admitted, her gaze dropping in embarrassment. And here I am. What do you want from me? Shelter? Care while you wait for Prince Charming to come back. I was hoping you'd let me stay just until I get back on my feet, she pleaded. There's a shelter downtown, I pointed out. That's what they're there for. That's where my taxes go, to keep people like you off the streets. I tried, but they were full, Ella admitted. Even the WCA and the big church downtown had no space. Please, Jake, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Cook, clean, whatever you need. I wanted to lash out, but I held back, glaring at her. She flinched visibly. What makes you think I'd want you around? To me, you're like a health hazard. Then it hit me. You've been trying to sell yourself, haven't you? She looked down, tears dripping onto the table as she nodded. How do I look? No takers, she asked. I looked her over before replying. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Maybe I should just leave. Maybe I should just disappear into some alley. No one wants me anyway, Ella cried. I watched her sobbing at the kitchen table, torn between anger and pity. Even though I deeply hated her, seeing her in this state after all these years was unsettling. And then there was Scott, the jerk who took her from me only to mistreat her. My contempt for him grew stronger. Raised never to use violence against women, I wrestled with conflicting feelings. Taking a reluctant breath, I suggested we eat first. Ella agreed, saying she was starving. I made scrambled eggs and bacon, recalling how Ella used to make them. Her eyes brightened when I served her, especially with the cheese on the eggs. As she ate eagerly, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. After finishing, she thanked me for the meal and praised my cooking. She declined more food but asked for another cup of coffee. Sure, I said, taking her cup. When I came back, she sipped her coffee and seemed a bit better. A shower might help, I said bluntly. No offense, but you smell. Ella's face fell. I'm sorry. Can I use your shower, please? You know where it is, I said. Towels are where they always are. My robe will be on the door. Don't put it back on after your shower. You can use the washer and dryer for your clothes. As she disappeared into the bathroom, I grumbled about cleaning up. Then I washed the dishes and went upstairs to get ready, thinking about Ella's departure with Scott and the betrayal that shattered me. Counseling had helped, and I channeled my emotions into writing, eventually publishing a book about my experience, which brought me some closure. Another factor in keeping my sanity was my involvement in martial arts. Initially, two senseis had urged me to quit due to my intensity during sparring. But I found guidance from a retired Marine at the community center. Unlike others, he stayed calm during our sessions, teaching me to channel my emotions into controlled strikes rather than letting them control me. It was a hard skill to master, as shown by the bruises I'd accumulated. Seeing Ella again was a shock, especially with her health declining. I wondered if she was ill. Strangely, my anger shifted towards Scott. Even though I initially wanted to push Ella away, I hesitated. What if something happened to her? Could I handle the fallout? The thought of worsening my emotional state and facing potential legal issues was unappealing. I decided to get another perspective and called my mom. "Morning, Jake," she answered cheerfully. "What's going on?" Skipping the pleasantries, I blurted out, "Guess who showed up this morning? Now you've got me curious." "Who?" she asked. "Ella," I said. I heard her sigh. "What's the deal?" "What does she want?" I explained Ella's situation and what she had told me. "Mom, she looks terrible. My gut says I should kick her out. But I'd regret it if something happened to her." "Yeah, you're probably right," Mom said, reflecting my concern. "Plus, she treated Scott terribly." "I know she hurt me deeply," I added. "But maybe it's wise to hear her out." "How about I come over later?" Mom suggested. "That sounds good, Mom. Your input would be invaluable. Let me handle it for now, and I'll see you soon." "Thanks, Mom. I really appreciate it," I said gratefully. We ended the call, and I went about my chores. Slipping into my usual summer attire, tee and jeans, I headed downstairs. Ella had already started on the laundry, wearing my old robe and slippers, waiting for me in the living room. I didn't check to see if she had anything on underneath. The robe was tightly tied, and dark stains marred her legs. Although she smelled better, her appearance was still disheveled. "Want a coffee refill?" I asked. "Yes, please," she responded. I poured another cup and joined her. Her hands shook slightly as she took the mug. "Thanks," she murmured. "I'll head out once my clothes are done." "There's no rush," I said. "I have a few questions, if you don't mind." "Sure," Ella agreed. "Scott faced malpractice claims. Didn't doctors like him have insurance?" I asked. "They do," she replied, "but it turned into a class action. Even though many claims were baseless, the insurance company refused coverage because of the volume of judgments against him. So, some claims were valid?" I pressed. "Yeah," she said, "the unproven ones were dismissed due to lack of evidence, but the damage was already done. We lost our jobs and licenses." "Didn't you have 401(k)s?" I asked, surprised. "We did," Ella said, "but we had to use them up, paying huge penalties. In the end, we lost everything." "What's Scott doing now?" I asked with a hint of dark amusement, recalling his earlier ambitions. "He's a parking attendant now, making about $16 an hour," she said. "And you? What are your plans?" I shifted the focus. "I was thinking about office work in the medical field," she said quietly. "Even though I lost my nursing license, I'm still hopeful." "Well, good luck with that," I said. "What about transportation and housing?" "I can take the bus or walk," she sighed. "I'll figure something out, but I need money for that." "And you don't have any," I noted. "Were you hoping I'd support you until you got back on your feet?" "Yes," Ella admitted. "I know I'm not owed anything, but after everything I went through with the divorce, I hoped for some kindness." I looked at her, my anger melting into a reluctant pity. "You're right. I don't owe you anything." She seemed defeated, but I sighed and added, "I'm not heartless. You clearly need help. My mom's on her way to talk with you before I make any decisions." "Of course," Ella said, visibly relieved. "Your mom has always been important to me. And she cared about you too, didn't she?" "Yes," I said. "So, you need to be completely honest with her." "I will," Ella promised. "And Jake, thank you. Truly, hold off on the thanks for now, I cautioned. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole and saw my mom. I greeted her with a hug and let her in. Ella, is that really you? Mom exclaimed, spotting Ella in my old robe. They embraced and exchanged warm kisses. It's nice to see you again, Carol, Ella said. Jake, dear, why don't you give us some time alone? Mom suggested, sensing the need for privacy. I nodded and headed to my home office, closing the door behind me. I surfed the web, looking into the malpractice lawsuit against Dr. Scott Turner. I found troubling details. Scott had misdiagnosed about 97% of his 2,000 patients with epilepsy over 4 years. Many children were misdiagnosed or overmedicated, leading to unnecessary treatments. Ella had often been implicated as an accomplice. The hospital had to refund $300,000 for improper billing, resulting in their termination and license revocation. Reading this made me sick. Scott seemed to be the main perpetrator, with Ella following his lead. My mother interrupted my thoughts, expressing concern about Ella's health. I think Ella needs to see Dr. McGregor, she said gravely. He's been our family doctor for years, and I worked for him until I retired. Why? I asked. I can't diagnose, but I've seen a lot of cancer cases in women, Mom said. I'd bet she needs urgent medical attention, Mom continued. I know Ella has strained our relationship, and I understand your feelings. But if she's dealing with health issues, we should help. It's the right thing to do, she gave me a small, lopsided smile. Your father and I didn't raise you to be cold-hearted, I smiled back, shaking my head. Okay, what's the plan? I've called Dr. McGregor, Mom said. He'll see her today and run tests. If they find anything, they'll refer her to a specialist and help with Medicaid. I'll take her there, you can't afford that, I objected. Here, Mom said, handing me $200. Thanks, Jake. You're a good son, just so we're clear, I said firmly. I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing it because of the values you taught me. I'm not forgiving her or taking her back, I understand, Mom said quietly. An awkward silence followed. Did she mention Scott assaulted her? I asked finally. Yes, Mom confirmed, her face neutral. She did, I nodded briskly. That scoundrel needs consequences, I thought. Another tense silence lingered. Keep me updated, I instructed. I will, Mom assured, kissing my forehead before leaving. I stepped out of my office to find Ella in a different outfit, still worn but clean. Thanks for breakfast, Ella murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. No problem, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. After Ella and Mom left, I locked up and poured myself another coffee. I dove into researching Wisconsin's laws on spousal abuse, but the time limits for prosecution were discouraging. With no clear timeline for Scott's attacks, I doubted any legal action could be taken. Frustrated, I considered taking matters into my own hands but quickly dismissed the idea. To clear my mind, I changed into workout clothes and hit the stationary bike, pushing myself through a grueling session. Over the years, I transformed from out of shape to fit by sticking to a rigorous exercise routine. Afterward, feeling refreshed, I showered, dressed, and had a light lunch while catching up on the news. By mid-afternoon, I listened to Mom's voicemail. I was wondering where you were, she said when I answered the phone. We're just finishing up with Dr. McGregor, Mom's weary voice came through. From her tone, it was clear Ella wasn't nearby. Any updates? I asked. Dr. McGregor is worried. The tests indicate stage 4 cervical cancer, Mom said. He set up an appointment with an oncologist for Friday. Ella's applied for Medicaid and emergency aid. McGregor also suspects physical abuse, we know, I replied. She mentioned not eating. McGregor thinks it's more serious, Mom said, concern evident. She's severely lacking in essential nutrients. I'll take her out for a meal, get some essentials, and grab her suitcase, I said. She should stay with me for now. We need to talk. That sounds good, Mom agreed. Keep me updated. Love you too, I replied. About 3 hours later, Ella and Mom arrived. We settled in the study while Ella packed. Sorry for the delay, Mom said, her tone apologetic. No worries, I said. What's the plan? I'll be taking care of Ella until her appointment, Mom explained. She still has feelings for you and wanted you to know that. No chance of reconciliation, I said firmly. Not after everything she's done, I understand, Mom said. Ella thinks she can win you back. Not happening, I said. I've moved on. I miss the old you, Mom admitted. Can you come to dinner on Friday? I'll be making lasagna, of course, I agreed. Your lasagna always brightens the day. We hugged, then headed back to the front room where Ella waited with her suitcase. If it's okay with you, I'll stay with your mom, Ella said quietly. That's up to her, I replied, glancing at Mom. Thanks for breakfast and for listening, Ella said, tears welling up in her eyes. You're welcome, I said, nodding. Don't forget about dinner on Friday. I'll be there, I promise, Ella assured. Over the next 2 days, I busied myself with work and home maintenance. With summer break in full swing, I had to juggle curriculum planning and household chores. I trusted Mom to take care of Ella, knowing she was resourceful. Finally, Friday came. After a shower, I picked up some wine and headed to Mom's for dinner. I arrived around 6:15, and Ella greeted me at the door. She led me inside, where Mom was bustling around in the kitchen. Ella looked on the verge of tears. I thanked her and handed Mom the wine, which made her smile. We sat down for dinner, but Ella seemed on edge. How did things go today? I asked. We got Ella's application approved, Mom said, trying to sound upbeat. Thank goodness for the new online system. I wish they'd had it when I retired. So Ella's medical costs are covered? I asked. Yes, and she'll receive a monthly allowance from the state, Mom confirmed. Since she'll be staying here, she won't need much. They're pursuing child support, but it's not promising, I said, feeling grim. That's good, I replied. And the oncologist? Mom's face grew somber. They found stage 4 cervical cancer. It's spreading quickly. Can it be treated? I asked, struggling with a mix of emotions. Possibly, Mom said cautiously. With treatment, she might have a 10 to 15% chance of improvement. The doctors think it's been developing for about 4 years, Ella tearfully added. If it had been caught earlier, my chances would have been over 90%. That's terrible. Scott didn't notice anything? I asked. No, he never mentioned it, Ella explained. I noticed changes but didn't want to worry him. What kind of changes? I asked gently. Intimacy became painful, Ella confessed. We stopped altogether for a while. I tried to redirect the conversation. New medications might help, I suggested. As Mom added, they could increase her odds by 10 to 15%. What's your plan? I asked Ella. I'm going to fight, she declared. I'm not ready to give up. And how long will treatment last? I asked Mom. Up to a year, maybe longer, she replied. Will Ella stay here? I pressed. I think it's the best option, Mom said. I'll be taking care of her. Reluctantly, I agreed. That makes sense. Can you handle this? I looked at Ella, remembering the painful past. Ella noticed my change in demeanor. I know you don't trust me, but, she began. That's an understatement. I thought that I cut Ella off sharply. If you hurt my mother or cause any trouble, I'll kick you out, cancer or not. Got it? Yes, Ella replied quietly, her eyes brimming with tears. Mom stepped in, suggesting we take a break. How about some dessert? She offered. I can help, I volunteered, but Mom shook her head. You two need some time alone, she said gently before leaving the room. Ella wiped her tears away. I started reading your book, she said softly. I have footage from that night, I revealed. Would you like to see it? Ella looked stunned. No wonder you hate me, she said, sobbing. It's all in the book, I continued. Do you really want to see it? No, Ella said again, her face contorted in pain. I understand why you feel this way. Mom reappeared with a fresh apple pie. Yolanda suggested exercise, she said, placing the pie on the table. That's why you look so good now, Ella remarked. Yes, I confirmed. I've been into martial arts and fitness, but you're still angry, Ella observed. It's better, Mom reassured her. 2 years ago, you wouldn't have even made it through the door. I'm truly sorry, Jake, Ella said, her voice filled with regret. I knew it would hurt, but I didn't realize it would devastate you like this. That's why I gave you everything in the divorce. I thought it would help you recover. When you didn't contest it, I assumed you'd be okay. To be honest, my lawyer was shocked when he saw your petition, I confessed. He advised me to sign it quickly, fearing you might reconsider. Have you dated anyone since then? Ella asked tentatively. Not really, I replied bluntly. Just a few drunken one-night stands, but I don't even remember their names. I noticed Mom's eyebrows shoot up in disgust, but she kept her comments to herself. At that moment, I didn't care about her reaction. Oh God, Ella sighed. I don't know what to say. A simple apology won't cut it, I said bitterly. We ate pie in silence, Ella's hurt evident. I avoided looking at Mom's face, knowing her concern was palpable. After saying goodbye, Mom walked me to the door. Are you sure this is the right thing to do, Mom? I asked quietly. What about her family? Can't they help? I called her parents and sister, but they refused to help, Mom replied sadly. What a messed up family, I muttered. You didn't abandon me, despite how bitter I became. Family takes care of family, I agree, Mom said tearfully. What are Ella's chances, really? Mom looked at Ella before answering. It's hard to say. Treatment has made progress, but it's uncertain. A lot depends on her will to live. Ignoring that, I expressed concern for Mom. What if she does something behind your back? I worried. I know you don't trust her, but she's at rock bottom right now. People with nothing to lose can be unpredictable, Mom said. Be careful, I urged. If you need anything, let me know. I will, Mom promised. Thanks for dinner. I'll be in touch. Love you too, I said, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. Try to keep your emotions in check, Mom requested. Don't push her too hard. I'll try, I sighed. That's all I ask. And I promise not to play matchmaker. Thank you, Mom said, smiling as I left. The next 2 months flew by as I focused on home projects and preparing for the school year. On Fridays, I visited Mom's house for dinner. I saw Ella's chemotherapy taking its toll on her, leaving her weakened. Despite the treatment's goal of healing, it seemed ineffective in her case. By mid-August, she had lost all her hair and wore a stylish chemo cap. While my feelings for Ella hadn't changed, I made an effort to be polite, mainly for my mom's peace of mind. Ella started receiving small deductions from Scott's paycheck and opened a bank account with Mom overseeing the funds. Ella insisted on sharing with Mom for expenses, and Mom agreed, setting aside 10% for emergencies. On the eve of the new school year, I arrived at Mom's house to find an unfamiliar car parked outside. Seeing Scott's disheveled form triggered an unsettling feeling. Mom and Ella looked apprehensive. Scott, in stark contrast to his former self, appeared unkempt in dirty jeans and a shirt. Well, look who it is, Scott sneered. The arrogant teacher, my anger flared, but I tried to keep my cool. Though I'd never been in a physical fight, my martial arts training had taught me to avoid confrontations. Even if you win, the repercussions can last a lifetime. What are you doing here, Scott? I asked coldly. I want the money that woman took from me, he growled. Took? I thought the court ordered a portion of your income for alimony, I said, my tone conveying my disdain. It's all the same, Scott hissed. They took my money, and now I'm facing eviction because I can't pay rent. You used the money to travel here from Milwaukee. You could have used it for rent, I pointed out. Don't play games, teacher. Maybe I should have taught you a lesson 10 years ago, Scott threatened. She stopped me, insisting I treat you with respect for looking after her all those years. Why don't you leave and pretend none of this happened? I suggested cautiously, raising my hands in a gesture of peace to avoid escalating the situation, which could lead to a violent confrontation. Scott's gaze was cold, but I doubted he knew about Ella's condition. She was ill, battling cancer, and she needed support. Cancer, huh? Is that just another one of her lies? Scott scoffed, setting aside his soda and sandwich. To my horror, he pulled out a revolver from behind him. Funny thing is, I happen to have the cure for that, he taunted, aiming the weapon at Ella. Scott, please, Mom pleaded, pointing to her phone on the table. The emergency operator likely heard everything. I've already called the police. They're on their way. I tried to position myself between Scott and Ella, but he quickly swung the gun towards me, his desperation clear. Mentally, I retreated. I wasn't about to get shot by a cop after everything I'd been through. Stay put, teacher. Don't make a move, Scott warned, his hands trembling. In that tense moment, we saw red and blue lights flashing outside the front windows and heard a voice over the intercom. Mr. Turner, this is the police. The house is surrounded. We're aware you're armed. Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up. You should listen, I urged Scott, who looked wide-eyed. How did they know about my weapon? Scott demanded. I informed them when I saw it in your waistband, Mom disclosed. And Jake's right. Follow their orders. This is your final chance, Mr. Turner. Surrender the weapon and exit the premises, the officer continued through the speaker. Scott's expression grew increasingly uneasy as he glanced at us. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw his resolve waver. If you were smart, you'd comply, I advised. There won't be another warning. Suddenly, the back door flew open, and two officers stormed in, their pistols drawn and aimed at Scott. Drop the weapon, one ordered. Scott turned, his eyes widening as he faced the two loaded guns. Recklessly, he raised his firearm, but the officers fired first. The sound of gunfire was deafening, and Ella's scream pierced through the chaos, shocking me. Two more officers rushed in, and Mom reacted, clutching a family heirloom. I stood frozen as officers tended to Ella and my wounded mom, while two others attended to Scott. One officer confirmed Scott's death, leaving me shaken. Despite feeling a mix of relief and resentment, I focused on steadying Mom. Paramedics arrived shortly after, determining Scott's fate and attending to Ella. I offered to accompany Mom to the hospital, and at the crime scene, detectives took our statements and advised us to leave. They assured us the house would be secured and recommended a cleaning service. As we drove to the hospital, my mind spun with conflicting emotions. Ella, whom I had once harbored dark fantasies about, was now fighting for her life. Despite feeling a pang of remorse, I pushed those thoughts aside. At the hospital, we navigated through bureaucratic red tape and eventually settled in the waiting area for Ella's surgery. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor finally approached us. Mrs. Mitchell, he inquired. Yes, that's me, Mom confirmed. How is Ella? I asked, holding my breath. Miss Turner is stable and improving, the doctor said. She's expected to pull through despite the gunshot wound. Fortunately, the bullet passed through without hitting any critical organs. She's lucky. A fraction to the left, and it could have been fatal, thank God, Mom breathed a sigh of relief. What else did you find? She's lost a lot of blood, and her condition from cancer and chemotherapy isn't ideal, the doctor explained. We've also detected signs of infection in her system and informed her oncologist. I've ordered additional tests as a precaution. Oh dear, Mom sighed. Will she be all right? It's too early to say, the doctor replied. She's currently sedated. We'll need to keep her here for at least 3 days. You may visit her tomorrow morning at the earliest. Here's a card with a contact number for updates and her room assignment. We drove back to Mom's house in silence, her tears mixing with the soft hum of the car. My thoughts were a whirlwind of disbelief and sorrow. Ella, whom I once wished harm upon, was now clinging to life in the hospital. Though I felt a pang of remorse, I set those feelings aside as we arrived home. The crime scene tape had been discarded in the trash, and a note from the detective declared the scene cleared. Mom immediately set to cleaning up, while I disposed of the chair where Ella had been shot. Upon returning, I found Mom on her knees, scrubbing the floor with tears streaming down her face. I offered to help, but she refused, determined to handle it alone. I suggested she stay at my place, but she insisted on staying. Respecting her decision, I resolved to stay with her. Despite her protests, I prepared dinner, and we agreed that a glass of wine would be a fitting end to a tumultuous day. As she resumed cleaning, her movements became more frantic. Concerned about potential nightmares, we found solace in the glass of wine and sheer exhaustion, sleeping deeply until morning. We moved quietly through the house until the phone interrupted our somber atmosphere around 10 o'clock. I retreated to the kitchen to give Mom some privacy. When she joined me a few minutes later, she told me Ella's condition was serious but stable. Ella was undergoing tests and was expected to return to her room by mid-afternoon. I was lost in thought, barely registering the emotions swirling inside me. Mom broke the silence by asking for a ride to the hospital at 2:30. I agreed, heading out early to run some errands before picking her up. I bought flowers and a book for Ella, trying to distract myself from the heavy feelings. At the register, Mom teased me playfully, which made me brush off any deeper thoughts about the situation. Her words lingered, a reminder that it was okay to have complicated emotions. We arrived at Ella's room. Although she was awake, she looked exhausted. Mom kissed her cheek and handed over the flowers and card. Ella's face lit up when she saw the flowers. My favorites, you remembered, Ella said, her voice weak but warm. Yes, I replied, handing her the book. I remember you were reading this before you left with Scott. Yes, I was. Thank you, Ella said softly, clutching the book as if it was a lifeline. Any updates? Mom asked gently. Not yet, Ella replied, shaking her head. She held the book close, almost like a comfort object. They said it could be a day or more before I hear anything. That's okay, Mom said soothingly. A nurse entered, checking Ella's vital signs and handing her some medication. How are you feeling? The nurse asked. Terrible, Ella groaned. I'm exhausted. My side and stomach are killing me. They'll figure it out, Mom reassured her. And Scott? Ella asked, still avoiding eye contact. He was pronounced dead at the scene, Mom said quietly. Good, Ella replied firmly, finally showing some strength. I'm glad he's dead. Mom's face darkened, but she stayed silent, patting Ella's hand and nodding understandingly. I stayed quiet, listening to their conversation. Ella's condemnation of Scott eased some of the anger I had held for years, but it didn't erase a decade of bitterness. The nurse administered Ella's medication and said, It's time for your meds. Try to rest now. Ella swallowed the pills and asked, Can you call me Ella? I'll let the staff know, the nurse said, recommending that Ella get some rest. Mom asked about the test results, and the nurse said we'd have more information by tomorrow morning. We exchanged farewells, and I noticed Ella's longing look as we left. I gave her a faint smile before closing the door. After dropping Mom back at her house, I went home to catch up on my weekend tasks. The next morning, we met again in Ella's hospital room. Mom, who had arrived earlier as a part-time volunteer, was already there when I arrived. Soon, 2 doctors entered. Dr. Reynolds, the surgeon, and Dr. Bennett, the oncologist, introduced themselves. Despite their professional demeanor, their concern was evident. "What's the latest?" I asked, hoping for good news. Dr. Bennett started. "Ella is battling both peritonitis and diverticulitis, which align with some of the symptoms we've discussed." Dr. Reynolds continued, "Our scans show several large pockets of infection in Ella's abdomen. We also suspect her gallbladder might be perforated and will need to be removed." "How did this happen?" I asked, feeling Mom's grip tighten on mine. "There are several factors at play," Dr. Bennett explained. "Her underlying condition, combined with the effects of cancer and chemotherapy, likely exacerbated the problem." "What's the next step?" Mom asked softly. "We need to allow her body to recover from the recent surgery," Dr. Reynolds said. "She'll remain on antibiotics for the next couple of weeks while we monitor her condition. We've had to pause her chemotherapy during this time." "What are her chances?" I asked, struggling to stay calm. The doctors exchanged concerned glances. Dr. Reynolds said, "Without surgery, her chances are poor. Her condition is precarious. High doses of antibiotics could upset her metabolism and further weaken her, possibly leading to a fatal outcome. While the antibiotics seem to be controlling the infection, they won't fix the damage." Although we didn't see any perforation in the bowel wall, she was very close to it when we intervened. Performing exploratory surgery now is risky because manipulating the intestines could make things worse. Our goal is to clear the infection and repair any damage, but she needs to be strong enough for both the surgery and future chemotherapy. Her malnutrition has severely weakened her, and she won't be able to handle chemotherapy until the infection is under control and her body functions stabilize." Dr. Bennett's expression was grave as he spoke. "Peritonitis is a serious condition on its own, but with cancer complicating matters," he trailed off with a shrug. Dr. Reynolds picked up the thread, his voice heavy with concern. "The risks associated with the surgery are substantial. Given the extent of the infection and the damage to her internal organs, her chances of survival are estimated to be between 30 and 40%. Ella, though visibly sweating and wide-eyed, kept her voice steady. "So, without the surgery, my chances are slim to none, unfortunately. That's the reality," Dr. Bennett confirmed. "However, if you recover from the surgery, we can proceed with chemotherapy afterward, which should be manageable." Ella sank back onto the bed, her resolve wavering. "It seems we have no choice but to proceed with the surgery." "Very well, we'll arrange everything," Dr. Reynolds said, his tone professional but empathetic. After the doctors left, Ella's composure broke, and she burst into tears. Mom embraced her, offering comfort. "Don't worry, Ella. You have the best medical team here. They're doing everything they can. Everything will be okay," she said, trying to soothe her. I felt out of place, my emotions a chaotic mix. Not long ago, I might have welcomed the prospect of Ella's demise, but now everything was tangled in confusion and regret. "I need to head out," I said. "School starts tomorrow, but I'll visit you as often as I can." "Yeah, I'd appreciate that, Jake," Ella replied, her voice thick with emotion. Mom smiled at me, and I walked her to her car, waving as she drove away. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept my promise and visited Ella several times. Our conversations ranged from my teaching and students to her failed marriage with Scott, our own past, and the tangled web of emotions we were navigating. During one visit, I broached a sensitive topic. "I've been wondering about your family," I said. "Why do they seem to dislike you so much?" Ella's eyes clouded over. "Do you remember when I told you they disowned me after the lawsuit?" "Yes," I said, nodding. "Well, they knew about Scott from the beginning," Ella admitted. "They agreed to keep you in the dark. In exchange, Scott promised to support them in retirement and even offered to buy them cruise tickets. So you and your sister were aware of this?" I asked, my anger rising. "Yes," Ella whispered, looking down in shame. "It was another betrayal, and I'm deeply sorry. So, your family used you and Scott just like you used me," I said coldly. Ella looked distressed. "I know. Things went downhill after the lawsuit. My family wanted nothing to do with me. That explains their treatment of me after you left, I remarked. And it sheds light on why you thought it was okay to use me while waiting for Scott. It felt like everyone had the upper hand but me, reinforcing my belief that reconciliation with Ella was unlikely given everything that had transpired. Ella seemed to share this sentiment and showed no interest in rekindling our past. Despite everything, as we reconciled, I glimpsed the woman I had once loved, sparking a flicker of hope. My animosity towards Ella and Scott lessened after his death, though I still wished for justice beyond this life. Mr. Harris had granted me a day off for Ella's surgery and arranged for a substitute teacher. At the hospital, I expressed my concerns before Ella was wheeled into the operating room. I know I've said hurtful things, and I'm sorry. I hope you can get through this. Ella's weak smile caught me off guard. Thank you, Jake. I accept your apology. I'm sorry for everything I've done to you. I love you, and you've endured more than you should have. Promise me something. What's that? I asked, feeling a sense of absolution. Find someone you love, no matter what, she urged sincerely. I will, I promised, feeling a sense of closure. The orderly interrupted us. We meet to proceed to the operating room, sir. Just a moment, I said. Spontaneously, I kissed Ella's cheek. You've got this, I reassured her. For a brief moment, she resembled the woman I married, and I wondered if she had ever truly loved me beyond my role as a provider. As the orderly wheeled her out, I felt a bit lightheaded. Mom, who had been quiet, murmured softly, "That was kind of you, Jake." We followed Ella's gurney into the waiting area, where we settled in. Hours passed as the surgery progressed. I tried to focus on the TV, but my thoughts kept drifting to the tumultuous events of the past decade. Mom crocheted quietly while I paced and drank cup after cup of coffee from the machine, trapped in a cycle of restless memories. 6 hours later, Dr. Reynolds emerged from the operating room with a troubled expression. He gestured for us to join him in a nearby room and sat down across from us, looking exhausted. I braced myself for bad news, my heart heavy with dread. Mom's grip on my hand was so tight it made my fingers ache. I anticipated his words before he spoke them. "I'm deeply sorry," Dr. Reynolds began, his voice filled with sorrow. "We did everything we could for Ella, but the infection and damage to her internal organs were too severe. Her body couldn't handle the strain. She had signed a DNR and consented to donate her body to cancer research." Dr. Reynolds' words were heavy with sadness. "Despite our best efforts, we couldn't revive her once her heart stopped. Please accept my deepest condolences." Mom's tears flowed freely, and though I felt my own eyes welling up, I managed to stay composed. I wrapped my arms around Mom, offering comfort as she sobbed, while I acknowledged the doctor's words with a nod. "Thank you for everything you've done," I said, shaking his hand. I noticed a tear escaping from his eye as well. Once Mom had regained her composure, we returned to Ella's room in a somber haze. We packed up her belongings quietly, understanding that words were inadequate in this moment. While going through the bedside table drawer, I found a small envelope with "Jake" written on it in Ella's handwriting. I opened it and unfolded the letter inside. "Jake," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. Thank you for being there for me, especially these last few weeks. You don't owe me anything, but you and your mother stood by me when others turned away. I know what I did to you 10 years ago was inexcusable, and I deeply regret the hurt I caused. Even now, a part of me still loves you, and I'm sorry for the chaos my involvement with Scott brought into our lives. I understand if you can't forgive me or feel the same way, and I respect that. I hope my passing will bring you some measure of peace." The letter left me shaken, tears streaming down my face as I showed it to Mom. We held each other tightly, crying together, something I hadn't done since my father's death 6 years earlier. As we packed Ella's things, I felt a profound shift within me. Years of anger and bitterness seemed to dissolve, replaced by an unexpected calm. Her death had somehow dismantled the walls of resentment I had built, offering a path out of the darkness I had been in. Surprisingly, her passing seemed to bring a sense of healing. After leaving the hospital, we took Ella's belongings to Mom's house and shared a quiet, somber dinner. Later, Mom handed me a photo of Ella, smiling in her chemotherapy chair, a keepsake to remember her by. When I mentioned contacting Ella's family, Mom offered to make the call, but I declined, recalling a previous difficult conversation. Instead, I promised to make the call once I got home, taking the number she provided. I called Ella's father, Frank, and was met with hostility. "I'm sorry to inform you that your daughter Ella passed away during surgery today," I said. "I don't have a daughter named Ella," Frank replied gruffly. "Not anymore," I said. "Why are you calling?" Frank asked. "I thought you might want to know," I answered. "What do you want from me?" Frank demanded. "Are you expecting us to request her body or something?" I asked. "No, she donated her body to cancer research," I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Well, at least her life served a purpose," he said coldly. "Don't call here again," I heard him curse before the line went dead. Though I was tempted to call back and express my anger, I knew it would be pointless. Sighing, I dialed my principal and informed him of the news. "I'm sorry to hear that, Jake," he said sympathetically. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I replied. "But I'll be okay, take the rest of the week off," he suggested. "I'll mark it as paid leave and arrange for a substitute, thank you." "I really appreciate it," I said. After ending the call, I grabbed a beer from the fridge. As I opened the bottle, I looked at the photo Mom had given me. "Here's to you, Ella," I murmured, taking a deep sip. In June, I drove to the cemetery, uneasy among the reminders of mortality. Parking beneath a large maple tree, I made my way to the monument. Despite its newness, it bore the name Turner, a choice I had reluctantly accepted due to bureaucratic demands. I placed a white carnation in the bronze flower tube beside the monument, reflecting on why I had chosen to bury Ella's ashes rather than scatter them. Scott, on the other hand, lay in a neglected corner, marked only by a simple concrete block with a serial number. In a final act of closure, I poured a bottle of urine on Scott's grave. If anyone had caught me, I would have had some explaining to do. After a few moments of reflection, I bid him goodbye. All my tears had been shed the previous week at Ella's burial. Despite reaching out to Ella's family and friends, I felt like an empty canvas, neither sad nor happy, just waiting to be filled. As I walked back to my car, I noticed two other mourners nearby, a woman in a neat black dress with her long blonde hair braided, and a young boy in a camouflage jacket. Approaching them, I glanced at the sign, Ethan G. Maddox, Sergeant USMC. The woman looked at me with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said gently, not wanting to intrude. Before she could respond, the boy said, "I miss him so much." His eyes, a mirror of his mother's, were filled with longing. He must have been a striking man if he resembled his father. I knelt down and pulled out a notepad and pen from my pocket. "Here, son," I said, handing them to him. "Write him a note and tuck it in that crack next to the marker." "He'll get it." The boy hugged me, took the notebook and pen, and began writing. His mother looked at me with genuine gratitude. Suddenly, I heard two soft chuckles, one male and one female. The female voice whispered, "Keep your promise." In that moment, I felt that June would no longer be a struggle for me.